When do you need to know the order of your ideas? When does it need to be structured in the way that the final piece, whatever you're creating, whatever your writing project is, that it's in the final order, organization, structure that it needs to be in? In today's episode of The Written Compass, we're going to talk about when understanding order, structure, organization of your ideas is helpful in your writing process and when you actually might be procrasti-organizing. I'm so excited you're here. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Written Compass. I have a very fun and totally made up title for today's episode, Procrasti-Organizing. How many of you have decided that before you can move forward, maybe you've done a little bit of writing, maybe you haven't done any writing, but before you can move forward in your writing project, you got to get organized. You need to know the order of your ideas. You need to know the structure. You need to know what's going to come first, second, third, fourth. What's the beginning, the middle, the end? I'm raising my hand. I have done this. And what gets really interesting is there's nothing wrong with wanting to have organization in your writing. Our ideas, we want them to, for lack of a better word, make sense, be digestible, be understandable to a reader, and be intentional. But what I want to dive into here is when in our process do we need to focus on this idea of organization, this idea of structure? These are the kind of two words that I hear the most. I just need a little bit of organization. I just need a little structure. And then, that if then, when then kind of thinking. So when do you need to know the order of ideas? Well, in today's episode, I'm going to kind of reveal there's no one right answer to this. And I want to share when and why, most importantly, organizing your ideas and having a clear structure is helpful, and when it actually is potentially a form of just procrastinating, of just kicking the writing can down the road, and you're not actually getting any words down. Because here's the thing, we can think of all the structures and the orders and the way it needs to go, the way it needs to look, all up in our head. We can even write an outline or a bulleted list, but we don't actually have words around it. Like, who cares, So I want to use an example of when this kind of came up for me, and when I'm going to start with when structure actually was supportive in my process. So I had an opportunity, depending on when this episode lands, this article may or may not exist in the world, but I got to work with Women Thrive Media and do a podcast episode with them, and then also write an article for them in their online magazine, Women Thrive. And because of that particular media, that particular publication, they gave me some parameters to work within. They gave me some general word count that they wanted me to stick to. They gave me some tips of what they typically like to see their articles being structured as. And so what I did was, while they didn't say, do this, do this, do this, they said, keep this in mind, these things in mind. They allowed the writers to be creative. I went and looked at some of the articles, which is always smart to do whenever you're publishing within a structure or entity that kind of has done publications before, like an article or a blog. There are going to be some conventions or things that are often used in that publication. So I went and started to look at and read some of their articles that have been published before. And there were some things that I started to notice. Okay. So I noticed they had a little bit of an introduction. Then I noticed they had anywhere from like 3 to 5 main points. And then they had some kind of what I call, amen, wrap up, conclusion type of thing. And even within those 3 to 5 main points, I noticed that a lot of them would use kind of headings, or they would number them. They might be steps, or they might be processes, or they might be tips. They would use bulleted lists. So all of these things started to help me. I knew what I wanted to write about. I knew what the topic or the approach was going to be. What I did was go ahead and kind of word vomit all the things I thought I might want to include. And then, given that structure, I started to shift and shape and revise according to the structure of what was expected in that particular publication. Does that make sense? So I started with looking at the structure. I kind of put that down for a minute. I got myself and my words clear for me for the moment so that I knew this is kind of what I think I want to say. Kind of did my Anne Lamott shitty first draft. And then I went back and looked at the structure and then started to cut and move and shape and add and delete, a lot of deleting because I always go over word count. Thank you very much. And this was a pretty short article, and kind of work it within the conventions and expectations of that publication. So the structure helped me in the revision process. It did help me, I believe, in kicking off, but it didn't dictate what I wrote. Okay. So I'm curious, when you are noticing you're feeling like, I just need to know the order of this, or I just need to get clear on, the details and the structure and the organization. When are you asking yourself that as you're going to write your emails, your social media post, your article, your book, all that sort of thing? And is that supporting you getting words down, or are you staying stuck? Because what we really want when we seek order and structure, it's really can be a way for us to feel like we know what we're doing, right? We know where we're going. We can see the end. We can see the outcome. And it's really a way to help satisfy that part of us that might feel a little worried or scared that we don't know what we're doing. We're not sure if this is going to make sense, all of that kind of thing. All of those things are totally normal and going to show up whenever you're taking your thoughts and feelings and experiences that you've kind of been feeling into and thinking through and holding on the inside and putting on the outside. It makes sense. We also learn that and get taught in school that structure is super, super important. But whenever, and I've talked about this many a times, whenever structure and organization and order supersedes your voice, your ideas, what you want to share, there's going to be some friction. There's going to be a little bit of tension, and you might find yourself procrasti-organizing, trying to sort and shifting and moving and thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll do this first and maybe I'll do that first. And you don't actually get to the writing. So just be mindful of when it is showing up and when it can be helpful. So I find that organization can be helpful sometimes just to kick off and just to step into what you might write about. It's helpful. So like for me with this article, it was helpful for me to read through the expectations or the rough parameters that they wanted me to work in, just so I knew, for instance, I wasn't writing a book, right? I'm kind of exaggerating that as an example, but I'm writing an article. I'm not writing a book. I'm writing an article. I'm not writing a chapter. I'm writing an article. I'm not writing a social media post, right? So we call those genres. We call those different forms of communication, forms of writing. So it helped me to start to shape, okay, as I'm creating what I want to create and sharing what I want to share, I'm going to keep in mind these conventions of an article. But when I actually went to go do my drafting of it, I let go of the structure for the moment. Because if I tried to, as I was crafting the words and as I was coming up with the ideas, made sure I was following that structure at the same time, I knew I was going to get stuck, right? I've seen plenty of scripts. I've tried to use them before. And a lot of times they censor me. They cause me to get stuck. They cause me to not write because I'm not seeing how my ideas are going to fit into that structure. So notice when it can be helpful. To me, it was also helpful to look at the structure and organization and think through that part as part of the revision, not a part of the drafting, not part of the creating, not a part of the initial just get ideas down. You can notice yourself if you're noticing when it's harmful and when you're probably procrasti-organizing is when you are more concerned or doing more work, whether that's just simply thinking or actually putting words down around structure and organization, and you're not actually putting sentences, paragraphs, content, true content down. So when this shows up, there's a few questions that you can ask yourself to make sure you don't get stuck in procrasti-organizing. Again, I don't want to condemn this. There's nothing wrong with wanting structure or order or organization. It's just noticing when and how it's showing up and really making sure you're clear on, is this serving me? Is this supporting me in getting blank written and out in the world or prepared for this, speaking thing that I'm doing? Or is this actually a form of me kicking the can down the road and not getting done what I need to get done? So some questions you can ask yourself is, what am I noticing right now? Oh, I'm noticing that I'm really wanting a structure. Okay, great. How do I think that structure is going to support me? What shows up around when I have the structure? Then what do I think is going to happen? Right? And then getting really clear. Is that true? Is that true for me? Is that something I think I should do? I had a great conversation the other day with one of our amazing legacy authors, and she was writing the introduction to her kind of journal interactive guide and around some coaching concepts that she offers her clients. And she was getting really stuck because she was like, well, I don't know what the audience is going to need. I don't know what the reader is going to need. Are they going to need this? Are they going to need that? Did I need to address this? Do I need to speak to that? Do I need to define this? Do I need to write these? Right? And she was just really stuck in the order that it needed to be in, what they needed first, second. And we just paused and I said, you've walked yourself through this kind of journaling before. She's like, yeah, this is what I've used. This is why I want to put it out there. It's kind of my core message. And I was like, great. How do you use this journal? How do you feel like you introduced yourself to working through it? And she was like, oh, and just rattled off all of these amazing things. We got them captured. And I said, what if this was your explanation, your introduction into how to use this journal? And she just laughed and she was like, oh, so don't think about the audience at all? And I said, yeah. What if you started there? We can always go back and rework it, restructure it, reorganize it with the audience in mind. But what I was noticing is she was not getting any writing down because she was worried about that structure organization based on what she was trying to anticipate from the audience. So asking yourself, what do I think is going to happen once I know this structure, right? Is a good way to kind of see, am I actually using it to help me? Is it going to be this little kick in the pants that I need to move the next part of this writing forward? Or am I using it as a way to actually not get any words down? So I want to hear what resonates with you with this. I want to hear, are you a procrasti-organizer? Are you someone that can get stuck in the organization? And let me tell you, it feels really good because it feels like you're doing something. But again, that really clear defining factor is that, am I actually writing or am I just procrasti-organizing, right? Am I just using these questions that I'm asking myself or this note-taking that I'm doing around structure and organization to not actually get words down and get this project complete? So as always, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what resonates, what questions, how do you support yourself when you feel like you're stuck in needing this kind of structure and things like that? And we have this amazing resource that talks about organization and structure, along with a lot of other things, basically everything you need to really kickstart your book writing journey. And it's called our Embodied Book Writing Kickstarter. Yay, simple. So we'd love to give that to you for free, no cost. It's a beautiful, giant tons of resources, tons of information in it. And we walk you through it in such a simple way. You can head over to shanahartman.com/writing kickstart to get access to that right now today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Written Compass. If you are enjoying this content, do me a favor and go and review the podcast. This allows me to share and get these messages out to the people who really need them, who we want to read their books in the future. You can also go and share your thoughts and tag me at @ShanaHartman_ on Instagram. Again, this is just a way for us to get connected and share the writing love. And if you know that you are ready to write your book, that message that's been burning inside of you for a long time, then I want to talk to you. My team and I want to talk to you. Head on over to shanahartman.com and click Work with Us. From there, you'll see an application to explore and see if writing your book is your next best step.